All right, number 3, we have a -6, -3. So my x is going to be on the negative side, -6. My y is going to go down because it's negative, so -3. And I'm going to make a triangle out of that. Okay, so I have my angle and I have my vector here. All right, so we need to figure out our hypotenuse. So let's go ahead and do the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I have -3 squared plus -6 squared. Okay, I have my two sides. So if I add those together, let's see, you get 9 plus 36, that's 40. What did I get? 45? Everybody get 45? Yeah, that's right. 45 equals c squared. You are going to need a little bit of room for this problem because this isn't a perfect square. We're going to have a radical in our problem. So anyway, just make sure you give yourself enough room. So we're going to take the square root of 45. Now I want you to go ahead and simplify this radical. And we've kind of talked about it a little bit in this class. Since 45 isn't a perfect square, I'm going to break it down. I'm going to make a factor tree. Okay, so what times what gives me 45? And you can use anything. A lot of people will use 9 times 5. Okay, you can break down the 9. What times what gives me 9? 3 and 3. Okay, so what you're going to do is your matches go outside the radical. And then whatever's left over, like the 5, that's going to stay inside the radical. So my hypotenuse is actually 3 square root of 5. All right. Okay, so now let's find our sine, cosine, tangent, all of that. So my sine is going to be the opposite over hypotenuse. So the side opposite of this angle is -3 over my hypotenuse, which is 3 square root of square root of 5. Okay, now you cannot leave your answer with a radical in the denominator. Okay, so first let's simplify this. Our 3's will cancel, right? So I have a -1 over the square root of 5. In order to get that radical out of the denominator, you're going to have to multiply it by itself. And we've done this year. I don't remember what we were doing, but we have gotten rid of a radical in the denominator. You just multiply it by itself. Okay, what you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So we get that would be negative square root of 5 in the numerator. In the denominator, we have square root of 5 times the square root of 5. That gives you the square root of 25, which is 5. So what happens is that radical, when you multiply it by itself, it cancels each other out. Okay, it's like having the square root of 5 squared, right? The square root and the squared will cancel each other out because they're opposite operations. So that's what's going on here. So this will be my answer. I can't simplify this anymore because that numerator has a radical and the denominator doesn't. Okay, so we're just going to leave it. All right, cosine. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So the side adjacent to theta is going to be -6. And my hypotenuse is 3 square root of 5. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is reduce that fraction. -6 divided by 3 gives me a -2. So -2 over the square root of 5. I've got to get rid of that radical, so I'm going to multiply it by itself. Multiply by the square root of 5. What I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. Okay, so I get negative 2 square root of 5 over 5. And that won't reduce anymore. Okay, the reason you don't get a negative 10 is because you can't multiply a number like negative 2 times a number with a radical. In order to multiply them, they either both have to have a radical or both not have a radical, be a whole number. Okay, you can't multiply two different terms. All right, so tangent is the opposite over adjacent. So my opposite side would be negative 3, and my adjacent side is negative 6. Okay, so if I reduce that fraction, I get, let's see, negative 3 divided by negative 6 will give me positive 1/2. Okay, so now we're going to do our cosecant, secant, and tangent. So cosecant, I'm going to do the reciprocal of my sine. Now, let's kind of think about this. If I flip my final answer, negative square root of 5 over 5, I'm going to end up with a radical in the denominator, right? And then I'm going to have to multiply by the same radical to the top and bottom like we did over here. So what I would do is take, see how we reduced that fraction to a negative 1 over the square root of 5? If I flip that, now I have square root of 5 over negative 1, and I don't have to multiply by a radical to get rid of it. Okay, so and you would get the same answer. You would get negative square root of 5 if you were to flip this and get rid of the radical and simplify it and stuff like that. But I think it's a little easier to take that fraction that had the radical in the denominator and flip that one instead. I think it's faster. Okay, but like I said, if that doesn't make sense, don't freak out. Just go ahead and take your answer, flip it, and get rid of the radical underneath. So secant, I would take this reduced fraction with the radical in the bottom and go ahead and flip that. So square root of 5 over negative 2 would be my answer. And then cotangent, if I flip that fraction, I get 2 over 1. Okay. So that's how you need to have exact answers. You need to simplify your radicals and make sure your answers don't have a radical in the denominator. Okay. And if you have questions about any of this, feel free to email me or rewatch the video, whatever helps. But you do need to have your answers exact with the radicals. All right, very last problem, number 4. Number 4, we have the point 4, negative 3. 4, negative 3. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw our triangle. So I have a positive x value, positive 4. My y value is negative, so it's going to go down, negative 3. And that'll get me to my point P, 4, negative 3. Okay, and I'm going to make my triangle. I have my angle theta, and I have my vector. So let's go ahead and figure out what that vector is, how big it is. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. 4 squared plus negative 3 squared equals c squared. Okay, so 4 squared plus negative 3 squared should give you 25. You have to put that negative 3 in parentheses if you're going to use your calculator with this. Okay, square root of 25 is going to be plus or minus 5. And for my hypotenuse, for my vector, it's always going to be positive. So positive 5. All right, now we're going to find our trig functions. So sine is going to be the opposite over hypotenuse. So my side opposite of this angle would be -3, and my hypotenuse is 5. Cosine is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse, so 4 over 5. Tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent. My side opposite is -3 over 4. And these fractions are reduced, okay, so we can leave them like that. Cosecant, I'm going to take my sine and I'm going to flip it. So it's going to be -5 over 3. Secant is going to be 5 over 4. And cotangent is going to be 4 over -3. All right, so that's what you're going to do on your worksheet today. Your notes has an example of every type of problem. You'll see this type of problem, an example of each. But if you need help, email me. Yeah, so y'all have a good day.